We're grateful to welcome Leila Banijamali with us today. She is an entrepreneur and technology lawyer in San Francisco, California. In 2009, she founded Bedrock, a San Francisco-based technology law firm where she is currently a principal. At Bedrock, Banijamali serves as outside general counsel to hundreds of startups, entrepreneurs, and creative professionals. She launched Startup Documents in 2014 to automate the incorporation and legal document process for accelerated growth startups. In addition to her lead roles with both Bedrock and Startup Documents, Banijamali is a mentor at Silicon Valley's Founder Institute, a participant at Stanford Law School's Codex, and continues to organize legal tech events at various law schools in the United States and Canada, including right now at BYU. So can you join me in welcoming her to BYU? So Leila's not a Mormon, but she suggested that we have a fireside chat. And I said, I don't know if you know what that means, but it's actually a big thing. No, it doesn't. No. Well, so firesides are sort of like a devotional meeting that we have. So if you have any religious thoughts during this, feel free to share.
Now's your chance to do
it. We were talking a bit of religion before, so maybe I'll sneak it in as we go on. But so we're just going to have a little conversation, and what we'd like to do is have that conversation because there's a lot of things we'd like to talk about, and then leave some time at the end for Q&A. If you just absolutely can't contain yourself, you can raise your hand during, but I think it's probably best if we just get through our conversation and then have the Q&A at the end. And if you do have a question, you need to come up to one of the microphones in the aisles to ask it so that it will be recorded. So Leila, let's start at the beginning. So we're talking about treating yourself as a startup or treating each of us as an entrepreneur. Can you tell us, you work with lots of entrepreneurs. You are an entrepreneur. What does it mean for our students to think of themselves as an entrepreneur, and how should they think about that, and what are their first steps?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for having me. I've been so excited all month, actually, telling everyone that I'm going to Park City, and they said, what are you going to Park City for? And I said, well, I'm going to talk at BYU. And they said, well, BYU's not in Park City. And then I got a little less excited, but then when I got here, I realized how amazing it is still. So I'm even thinking about moving here.
We're not far from Park City.
Yeah, if the right offer comes in, that might happen. But anyways, so where do we start with entrepreneurs? So I work with a lot of entrepreneurs. Some are very, very successful and you've heard of. Some you've never heard of before and you probably never will. All it means is I think, we all have entrepreneurial genes in us. How to create things, how to, even so far as take care of ourselves, help others. We have to be innovative, at least in some parts of our days, how to solve problems. And being an entrepreneur means just that. It's reimagining how we interact with the world and how we live our lives. That's all it is. And so, a challenge that I would have for all of you, and we're going to have several challenges throughout this, and these are the things that you should really write down because I want you to walk away with things that you can do to sort of exercise your entrepreneurial genes. And so one of the challenges I have is buy a notebook specifically for entrepreneurialism, your ideas, things that you want to see change in the world, opportunities that you see that you feel something about, and it can be super small ideas. But keep that notebook and take notice of every second in your day. And throughout your day, write down all of the things that you've interacted with or you've done that need improving. And it could be, this bottle needs to be more ergonomic. I'll give you one of my ideas. It was early on. So everyone knows those Voss bottles, they're glass bottles. They are really beautiful. You can buy them instead of these. And I think they only cost a couple dollars. It's just for the water inside it. But the bottle is really, really nice. And it's actually dishwasher safe. You can reuse it over and over again. It's unlike plastic. It doesn't taste like plastic. You can keep it forever, really. The problem is it comes with this very flimsy cap. So if you screw it on too tight, the cap will break. So one of my ideas was, why not create Voss tops? That way you sell those for $2 or $3 at a grocery store, and people will just reuse their Voss bottles instead of buying expensive designer water bottles for $20, right? There's an idea. It's a stupid little idea, but that went in my notebook. And there's stuff like that every single day.
So you haven't done that yet?
I haven't. No, and you're welcome to do it. I don't care.
Okay. Just giving ideas away here, yeah.
Oh, and that's very important. Lawyers tend to not, they advise to not share ideas. And I think that may be good or bad to some extent, but I think it's important for you to share your ideas. You should share your ideas with your colleagues, your friends. You may not give them all of your secrets behind your ideas. You don't need to tell them the secret sauce behind the J-Dogs, for example. But you ought to tell them, this is what the kinds of problems I'm thinking of solving. Have you ever experienced that? How would you solve it? This is the only way to get better, is you need other people.
I was just going to say, to show you that we're serious about this notebook idea, I brought some notebooks. So if you don't have a notebook, or you're too cheap to buy one, we don't have an unlimited supply, but I think we've got 10 up here. So first come, first serve, after we're done. Don't run up yet, but after we're done, come up and get your notebook. The price of getting your notebook is that you have to introduce yourself to Leila and tell her something about yourself, okay? So 10 people after.
Yeah. I've been saying this at a lot of the talks that I do, that I give, and that I really ought to sell my own notebooks. So that's an idea that's going to go in my
If you would like to make a contribution for your notebook, that would be fine. Make it out to BYU Law School.
So, a book that you should definitely read. How many people here are law students? How many law students do we have in the room? Okay, so almost all. Read Richard Susskind's Tomorrow's Lawyers. That's a really great book. It is absolutely mandatory reading if you are a law student right now and you are thinking of becoming a lawyer. It rewires your brain into thinking about new kinds of careers that are coming out in law. There's new opportunities. They're not technologies that are eliminating your opportunity for a job, but they're going to give you new opportunities. Think of it that way. One quick fact I learned last night, I was doing some sort of searching on the ABA website. It's not very exciting. 40,000 law students graduate every year, approximately. 2014, it was higher. 40,000 law students. There are only 120,000 people in all of Provo. So think about that. Every 3 years, the entire population of Provo is ready to take the bar exam. That's a pretty big deal. So you really have to think, how can I be competitive?
Good thing they're not all coming to Provo to practice.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that would be a little much. Yes, I recommend Susskind's book too. And one of the things that I think is important about entrepreneurship, and the reason I study entrepreneurship is that, and one of the reasons I was so excited to have Leila come and talk about this, is that this can matter to you no matter what you decide to do with your life, right? Because this is really about just trying to do whatever it is that you want to do better, do it in a new way, trying to find some way to improve your life. And it's not limited to your career, it's not limited to your professional life, it's very much part of our personal lives. We live in a culture that values change, that values progress, and to me, that's the very essence of entrepreneurship, right? Is that we are trying to change and make things better. And so I love the idea of just writing things down in the notebook, because you really want this to become part of who you are, part of your everyday life, part of the way you see the world. It's one of the lenses that you're going to use to make your life better.
I don't know if you have any sort of rituals or anything like that you do in your day. I won't jump to it quite yet because I know we're going to talk about it, but it's very important to be very disciplined about how you spend your hours in your day, and be very protective of that. It's very, very important to, if you're going to be creating things, basically, and following through with them. When I was in law school, I was a terrible law student. In fact, I failed 2 of my classes, and they became the classes that I became really popular for as a lawyer. So one of them was intellectual property law. I became a tech licensing lawyer, and I negotiated with hundreds of enterprise companies on really complex tech licensing deals. And I just could not pass that stupid exam. And so
I wonder if there's a connection, like if you were driven to
I think
prove.
I think I was just never a good exam taker. I think I just really excelled at other things. And so, if there's any of you out there like that, like me, I'm sure there are. You're looking at me like, nope, that's not me. I'm sure that you're out there somewhere. It doesn't matter. No one cares about your grades. Once you finish law school, maybe that first year we're trying to get a job, but like no one cares about your grades afterwards. It's just like you're in it right now. That's why it matters so much. But don't worry about it. You're going to get through this. And when you graduate a year out from now, no one's going to even ask you about your grades. So you can just tear that thing up and throw it away.
So I think this is a really nice segue into the next topic, which is, I think it's quite easy when you're a law student if you haven't found the course, for example, in which you excel, in which you got the top grade in the class, to think, well, maybe I'm just not, maybe I just don't have that much to contribute. Maybe I just don't have, some niche to, in this world. So maybe what I'll do is just become sort of a line worker in the legal factory. I'll just get a job, sort of hunker down, work my 9 to 5, and that's my contribution to the world. But I'm curious about when we think about entrepreneurship and making a contribution. To me, it's also about feeling like your life is meaningful. It seems like part of that is doing things you enjoy and are good at. So I wonder if you could say a few words about sort of helping our students here to think about, how do we find that competitive advantage? How do we find the thing that we're good at, that we're gifted at, and develop that thing?
So one of the ways to do that right off the bat is just to be completely honest with yourself. You have to know yourself pretty well in order to know what you like and what you don't like. And another exercise for the notebook, another challenge to you is write it down in a sentence, the reason why this company, and be very specific about which company, what law firm, whatever you want to work at, would hire me is because, and then fill in the blank. And write the same sentence for the person sitting next to you. You really have to know what you have and what you think you're missing or what you can work on. I think part of understanding your competitive advantage is just to try things, just do things. You don't know yet because you haven't done enough. You just have to try stuff. And that could be organizing, a meetup group, right? You can do that. That's very easy to do. I did that. It's called From Idea to Launch, FromIdeaToLaunch.com. We've done monthly events. We haven't done any in about a year. But there's also Creative Mornings, which you should check out. It's these really cool morning talks. I think every city has them. There may be one out here. If there isn't, you've got to set one up in Provo.
So Provo has 1 million cups. I don't know if you do that. Yeah, so 9 o'clock on Wednesday mornings down in the startup building in Provo. It's a nice opportunity to network with people who are in the entrepreneurial community here. It's free. The 1 million cups is a reference to coffee, but I think they actually serve something else at that thing in Provo. So one of the exercises I like to ask people to do is, can you write down? So we were talking about StrengthsFinder just before we came in here. And this is, so those of you who have taken the StrengthsFinder test, you can probably list your strengths, and this is one way to do it. But can you write down, can you actually tell yourself what your gifts are, what your strengths are? And if you think about, what am I going to contribute to the world? What am I going to do? I think that's a really great place to start. Like, what do you feel you're really gifted at? And if the answer is nothing, then you really do need to take StrengthsFinder, because there are things that you're gifted at. Everybody has gifts. That's one thing we know, that each of you has gifts. And the trick is to take those gifts and use them to serve other people. So I'd really encourage you to sort of use your notebook to think about that and reflect on it. And if it's not immediately obvious to you what your gifts are, like right now as I'm talking about that, if you can't list them in your, sort of make a mental list of those, then maybe one of the things you do with your notebook is you start to notice where you're gifted. And maybe your gifts are really simple gifts, like I have a gift of making people feel good about themselves. I have a gift of, maybe you're a gifted writer or a gifted speaker. But it doesn't have to be, your gift doesn't have to necessarily be a skill that you've learned in school. But think about what it is and then think about how can I use this gift to make the world better.
I'm glad you said that. So I have a friend who started a company right around the time that I passed the California bar exam, which was a nightmare. I don't recommend it. And she said to me, I have this
The bar exam or starting a company?
The bar exam.
Okay.
Yeah. Starting a company is no problem in comparison. So she said to me, I have this great idea I really, really like, and this was her gift, taking photos of food and sharing it. So she would take photos of food in restaurants and she would share it with her friends, and I guess her friends would do the same with her. And I'm going to start a company where I myself and whoever is on this website or app upload photos of food, and we'll all share with each other. And I think it'll be great. What do you think? And I was just like, sounds great to me. And in my head, I was like, are you crazy? That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. So how can you make a company out of that? But people actually really, this thing caught on like fire. Millions of users around the world searching for, not for restaurants like you would on Yelp, but searching for dishes on their iPhones that were near them, and it would show you on the map the photos of the food near you. It's called food spotting. You may have heard of it. It was acquired 2 years after we launched it for $10 million in cash by OpenTable. OpenTable now owns it. OpenTable was acquired after that, so everyone got paid twice. But
so maybe you have a really silly gift that is worth a lot of money.
But the point is that she felt really passionate about it.
Yeah.
She empathized with that issue. You have to find that empathy. And for Startup Documents, when I launched that, it was the exact same exercise. All of our startup clients did not want to pay a lot of money for legal fees, and why should they? They're starting a company. They should focus on their products, right? The last thing we want is to take money from these guys who really have such a short runway anyways. So we automated that whole formation process, legal documents for startups, put it on startupdocuments.com, and they can download that for a small fixed fee and really just focus on their products. That was something that was really important to me. And we launched it, and it did great in the first month that we launched. And people still write in and say, thank you so much for this service. There's other services like it, yes, but ours is better.
So you've mentioned a couple times sort of just do it or take action. You made reference to people just starting things, and I'd be curious to hear more about that. So let's say we've done. A student in the audience has already done what we've talked about. So they thinking of themselves as an entrepreneur, they're keeping a notebook, they've got some ideas, and maybe they think, gee, I'm sort of really attracted to this one idea that's in my notebook. Then what? Like what happens? I think you're not going to say, okay, analyze it to death. But what does it look like? What after that?
Right. So, definitely don't analyze it to death. I think the most important thing is to just take some small steps to actually build it. And if you plan too long, you're going to kill it. You'll kill the idea, someone else will come out with it, or you're going to you're not going to be as interested anymore. There's a bit of a trajectory that I would say is very, very common with entrepreneurs, and that is, especially ones that are starting companies, and that is there's this very sort of finite moment in the very beginning where there's an idea. I have an idea. Oh my God, this is the most amazing idea. I'm the smartest person in the world. This is such a great idea. You may even start telling people about it, and this is like all that you can think about. And wow, this is what it's going to be like to have a company and to own this idea. But that's not how it works. What you're going to find is that you're going to run into a problem, probably pretty early on when you're trying to figure out how to start this idea, and then that excitement will die. And then you'll realize, oh, well, maybe this isn't as easy and fun as I thought. And that's where most people jump to the next idea. But that's where you have to stick with it. And you have to stick with it because you have to see it through. It's right when it gets hard, when most people stop, that's when you need to continue forward. And that progression is very, very important. Now, there's a difference between continuing forward and just being, knowing when to stop. And knowing when to stop is equally important as well. But you really have to give it your all and not quit because it got hard. But quit because of a really good reason. Someone else owns the market already, and my widget isn't as interesting, or it's not as cheap, or I can't bring it to scale like they did. Well, do I need to quit the company? Maybe I'll just pivot. And instead of a widget, I'll make a gadget, whatever. I mean, that's sort of how you have to think about these things and do it really quickly. Read Eric Riss's The Lean Startup. That's a good book too.
Yeah. Riss is spelled R-E-I-S.
Yep.
Yeah, so Lean Startup is a great book. So the idea, when we talk about action, there's a concept that people use in business schools called learning by doing, which is pretty self-explanatory, but it's actually an important idea that we, in law school, we do a lot of our learning from books. And so we're not learning by doing, we're learning by reading and by listening to other people. But there's a lot of value in learning by doing things. And before this, we were talking about this idea that I really love, so I'm going to share it with you, called the adjacent possible. The adjacent possible is an idea that comes from biology, and the notion here is that it's from evolutionary biology, that organisms can only evolve to something that is adjacent to them, right? That is, there's only a limited possibility of places that, say, for example, a one-cell organism can evolve to next, right? It can't, you don't go from one-cell organism to human. It's, there's some steps in between. The steps in between are, each one is a possibility set. And you can only reach that possibility set by being adjacent to it. And so the idea here is that as you keep your ideas in your notebook, as you try new things, what's happening is you're learning, and you're creating each time you have a new idea. Each time you try something new, you're creating a new set of possibilities for yourself. And then you select from those possibilities, and you go there, and you'll find that when you get to that next place, you've got a whole new set of possibilities for yourself. Now, you may not stop very long at any of these possibilities. They may be way stations, but at some point you're going to find a place where you say, this is what I've been searching for. But you can't get to that place you're searching for in most instances in one step. It doesn't go from being third-year law student to place I've been searching for. It's a few steps in between, and one of the things we have to do is just take those steps. And that's why action's so important, I think, rather than analysis, because you can't even imagine that place you've been searching for from the place you are now, because you just don't have enough information.
Right. I couldn't agree more. So I can't tell you how many times people have told me that Startup Documents is such a copycat idea. There's so many other companies like that out there. There's other options. Why don't I just use LegalZoom? Why do I have to use your company? And the quick answer to that is that LegalZoom is great if you're setting up a company, any kind of company. It could be a bookstore, it could be a flower shop, or if you want a will or a trust or something like that. That's not what we do. We only work with companies that are accelerated growth, that we want to basically help them launch and get in front of investors, VC, basically. So we found a niche that we like, which is legal document automation, and then we created a niche within that niche, which is legal document automation for accelerated growth startup companies. And I think that's one way to think about things, is there's lots of companies out there that are really, really successful that you can point to, like Amazon, Uber, eBay, and you can create a niche within a niche of each of those. Uber is not just about transporting people, it's about transportation, and crowdsourcing that transportation, right? So I think that one way to switch your thinking and to think about, new ideas. So yeah, that's very important.
One of the things I wanted to say before we leave this topic is on this sort of bias for action, or I think lawyers sometimes can be, we're trained to respect tradition, we're trained to respect precedent, we're trained to respect rules. We study those a lot, and we come to, if not revere them, we come to at least respect that these are important to bringing order to our society. We're good as law students and lawyers at identifying boxes to put things in. And what we're suggesting to you today is that you create new boxes. And that's a little bit harder sometimes for some people who are trained to sort of, it may not feel like a natural inclination to you, but I think it's in the taking of action that the new boxes are created, because these sort of, because you're learning by doing, and that's where the growth comes.
Yep. So one thing that I want to share, that sort of the art teacher sort of story. There's an art teacher who challenged her class to basically divided them in half, right down the middle, and said, this half of the class has to produce as many art pieces as possible within 2 hours. And the right-hand side of the class was supposed to produce only a single piece of art in that 2-hour period. And the idea was an experiment to see who would create the most interesting work and who would create the most diverse ideas, like the most unique ideas. And so it turns out that overwhelmingly the side of the class that was just producing a large quantity of work had the most interesting ideas coming out of it. So one challenge for your notebook is, or for you in your notebook, is to take a topic, any topic that you feel strongly about, and time yourself and write a paragraph on it, maybe 30 seconds or so, and then time yourself again, turn the page, and just write several sentences, as many sentences as you can get out that are completely unrelated, almost like bullet points, just to see what kind of ideas you come up with and how different your line of thinking is, and you'll see what an amazing brain you have. So I really encourage you to do that. The second thing that's very important, please write this down too, is introduce randomness into your lives and be comfortable with it. We have these sort of schedules at school, at work, with our families, at churches that really put us into a certain line. And that's fine, but introduce randomness as well. So some CEOs that I know in Silicon Valley, really well known as well, will just turn on their watch and walk randomly somewhere for 8 hours, somewhere that they're not familiar with at all, just to go. And when you walk for 8 hours, just to go in any direction, just see what you're going to discover. And it could be 4 hours or 3 hours or 2 hours, but just include it in your day somehow, or in your weekend, or in the early morning. Just get up 2 hours earlier or whatever, and start doing that. And you'll see how many new ideas you're going to generate in that notebook, how many new people you're going to meet, which is hugely hugely important for your success. And
hopefully you'll have someone who can pick you up in Spanish Fork or wherever you're at, by the time you're done with that. I don't know.
Just be careful where you go. But, one thing that I like to do is I like to set up walking meetings with people. I don't like to meet people for lunch. A lot of founders in the Valley like to, let's meet up for coffee or whatever, juice or whatever, and and that's like it's very difficult to sit down at a table and just look at someone and have a conversation with them. It's very hard. You feel you have to be prepared for that, right? But try doing the same thing, going for a walk with someone, and see how easily the words come out and how naturally they come out. It's a huge difference, like a world of difference. I was just telling Dean Smith, an hour ago that, I don't know why it is, but my best ideas come to me in the shower. Does anyone else experience that? Raise your hand if you agree with that. It's really amazing, right? Your best ideas come to you in the shower. And I think it's because in that motion of whatever you're doing in the shower, you're almost clearing your mind of everything else. This brainless act that you've been doing every day for all of your life, it sort of cleans the palette in your brain to calmly remove yourself from whatever you were worried about before you took the shower, where you're sitting at your desk or in a conference call or whatever, and somehow you come up with these ideas that just pop into your head, Just try and notice that without trying very hard. This is what meditation is about, right? Is just try and notice your thoughts. Try and notice where they go.
I mentioned that when I'm writing papers on the cleanest person on the planet, I take like 3 showers a day. I gotta, whenever I'm thinking of it, I gotta get a new idea, I hop into the shower. So, we've got one more topic we'd like to talk about, and so we've talked about sort of getting these ideas. A lot of the stuff that we've talked about has been rather solitary, but we really, even here, we're surrounded by other people, we're exchanging ideas, we're thinking about this creative process. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of other people to the process?
Yeah, hugely important. So, sorry to report, you will never create anything amazing on your own. There will always be someone in your life that will influence that and will help you. And we create the most amazing things, whether they're companies or ideas, because other people help us to do it. So you need people. A lot of the ideas that I've distilled throughout the years for my talks have come to me from inspiration from Reid Hoffman's The Startup of You, which you should read if you haven't read it. Reid Hoffman, of course, is one of the founders of LinkedIn, one of the founders of PayPal. And The Startup of You is a great way to think about your life as a startup, just like we're talking about, how you can think of your law school experience from a startup perspective. And so, he says that there are only about 8 to 10 really close allies that all of us have in our lives that we consult with on a regular basis, that we defend, that we support in front of other people. We support their brand. We talk about how great they are. They do the same for us. When we have a challenge, they help us to overcome it or at least think through it. And then everyone else, like the hundreds of other people that you know or kind of know through your social networks or just, in school because you see them every day, they're really more like your acquaintances. So really be careful about that. The allies, meet with them regularly. If you want to bring in a new mix into your life, be the one to start talks like this. You be the organizer of it. You can be sitting in Dean Smith's chair and interviewing people like me or, even smarter people. Doesn't exist.
People who didn't fail their IP exam.
Yeah. So, I think by doing that, you really are the one that's putting yourself out in front of the crowd. And I'll tell you, the person that's on stage always gets the most number of contacts because everyone then approaches them afterwards. Not everyone, but that's sort of how it works. This may get recorded. It may become, go online. People will certainly contact me. It always happens. So do stuff like that. Go to events for sure, but organize your own. It can be on any topic. Nobody's going to judge you. When I talked to Scott Hefferman from Meetup, he's the founder of Meetup. I asked, it's kind of like a chicken and the egg. How do you start Meetup.com? You need a huge audience, but you also need meetups. Which one comes first, right? And he says, well, when we first started, does anyone know how this started? No? Okay, great. So they basically faked hundreds of thousands of meetups all over the world. There was like a Chihuahua meetup in Paris, right? And you signed up for it, and then you would get an automatic email that would say, sorry, this meetup hasn't been formed yet, and we'll let you know when it is ready. And then when 3 people signed up for it, everyone would get an email saying, congratulations, your meetup is ready to meet. Who's your leader? And, where do you want to meet? So that was that. So easy. And he got this going. I think they set up like 1 million different fake meetups. And then eventually they filled out, and it is what it is, right? So start something like that. I guarantee you there's lots of people who have your interest who are not in this room in Provo who would be happy to meet with you for juice.
Yeah, we have things other than juice, right? No, I think it's a really, really important. I loved what you said right at the beginning, which is you'll never create anything important on your own. I think I have a longer life to reflect on than you, but that's certainly been true. There are various things that I've done and people would attribute to me, but they're not, and I think it's a really important lesson that we have. It's one that I mentioned to all of our new professors when they come. A law professor seems like a very solitary life. You hunker down and you pick some topic and research it and then write a paper on it, right? And the biggest mistake that people make when they're first starting on that career is that they do exactly what I just described, right? And I said, what you really should do is write a sentence or a paragraph and then just start showing it around to people. What do you think of this idea? And all of a sudden you'll have a lot of ideas. Then you write a few pages and then you say, what about these ideas? Same as a law student, if you're writing a paper, don't keep the paper to yourself. It's not a big voila moment at the end, like here's this great paper that I wrote without talking to anybody else. It's almost always a horrible paper if that's the way you did it, right? But if you talk to a whole bunch of other people, then it can become a great paper. And I think it's really the same with any other idea that you have. So develop in yourself a trust in other people enough to share your ideas with them. Be comfortable with the idea that most of your ideas are bad ideas. That's okay. Most ideas that most of us have are bad ideas. I remember when I first came to BYU, I proposed an idea to the dean, and he had this long email apologizing for rejecting this idea, and I said, oh my gosh, please don't do that every time I have I got like 1 million of these. Just say, no, I don't like that one. Okay, here's the next one. So because I think you have to just recognize that most of your ideas are not ready for prime time, and it's really going to be sharing it with other people that's going to develop those ideas.
And I think just becoming comfortable with no. No is a good word. It's okay to hear that your idea is terrible.
Yeah. Next idea. Yeah.
Exactly, and you get better at building your tough skin around that. But it's okay for people to tell you how dumb your idea was. That's all right.
So when actually I'm just looking at the time, but I want to ask you one question, then let's open it up to question and answer. So what do you do when you see, or when you hear of somebody or see somebody that you think, I want to meet that person? What do you do?
So I just reach out to them. I just put myself out there and I reach out to them and I say hello. And the first thing I do is I notice what it was that I liked that caught my attention. I say it, whatever it was, and I offer to help. I don't know how I could help. Sometimes I just offer to help not knowing what they need. But oftentimes I'll ask, I don't know what you need, but I'd love to support you in your good cause. Please let me know if we can, take a 10-minute walk together, a 15-minute walk together, 30-minute walk together, so I can learn about, your side of the story and how I can help. If there's people that I can introduce you to, let me do that. If you're, let's connect on LinkedIn. If you see anyone in my network that you'd like an introduction to, let me know. Sometimes that's not a great thing because I don't know a lot of people in my LinkedIn network. But, the fact that I'm putting it out there means something. There's also a lot of people that I do know. So I think the first thing to do is figure out how to help that person. And it was the first thing that Dean Smith said to me, and it was immediately the second thing that I said to him was, what would you like to do? What's your ultimate goal with these series of talks? How can I help? And that's
I
where
saw Leila on a webcast and then found your email address and wrote to you, and then your response was, how can I help? Yeah. And so exactly that. Why don't we open it up for questions? And if you have questions, come to the mics that are in the aisles. And don't, stampede. But
everyone is shy. I don't have any questions. I know everything. All right.
I was just going to say, I looked at my LinkedIn. I have like 2,500 links on LinkedIn. I was thinking I can probably name 100 of these people. But
Hi. So my name is Eli MacArthur. I'm an aspiring law student. I did physics undergrad. So I've always been interested in this idea of entrepreneurship and inventing, and my thought was going into intellectual property law. What was interesting to me is that you're listed as an entrepreneur and technology lawyer. So What's the difference there between, I know with intellectual property, you're protecting your work and patents and copyrights, etc. But you focus more on helping people fill out the right forms to start a business, or what's that delineation there?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Eli. So, so I don't think there is a line between the two. I think it's possible to be a good intellectual property lawyer and to be an entrepreneur at the same time. In my work as an intellectual property lawyer, I mostly negotiate tech licensing deals. A client of mine creates software that they want to license to, GE or Google or Tesla, and we sit down with their lawyers and we negotiate the deal. In the case of startup documents, for example, we've automated certain components of legal documents so that startup companies still have access to all of our forms, and based on how they respond to the questionnaire, the clauses are all coded, so they're regenerated based on the response and generated for them. In the same way that I would protect intellectual property of my clients at my law firm, those forms still protect the customers that are using the service. So I don't see that there's much of a line as far as the difference between entrepreneur and intellectual property lawyer. Is that the question, or?
Well, sorry.
No, it's okay. We can hear you. Yeah.
But do you come in after the patents have been created and then help them decide what they should do with this patent to turn it into a business?
No, so that's okay. I understand now. We actually don't do any patent work. For that, we refer it out. Sometimes entrepreneurs will come to us and say, we want to launch an idea. What do you think? Where do we start? And we used to help them with all of the beginning stages. We have this blueprint that we created based on all our hundreds of conversations. Need to form a company. Why? Because company needs to own all of the intellectual property, because company needs to take on all of the liability, not you individually as founder. Issue shares from the company to people who own our founders, essentially. And then be ready for the company to issue shares to investors and all of these other things. And once you start developing your idea, who's developing it for you? Is it independent contractors, employees? Make sure there's agreements in there to make sure the intellectual property is owned by the company. So we really only do the contract stuff. So more trade secrets than patents. There's patents, trademarks, copyrights, and trade secrets. We're more on the trade secret side, and that's how we protect IP. Yeah. Yep.
So Eli stole my question, so I'm going to come up with another one. So you have a lot of experience in Silicon Valley, and I wanted to know, and it seems like you've networked a lot with CEOs and gotten to have present yourself in front of a lot of people. Do you feel like with this culture of networking today, are there any tips or almost warnings or advice you would give as far as networking? Because I know we have law students here, we have business students, we have engineers, people interested in tech in this area. But what would you say would be good advice for those that are transitioning into that networking business world from that maybe don't have experience or maybe have more of a technical background?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. I think, well, first of all, there's a lot of people like that, so that's the good news. And I think, I didn't take a traditional path out of law school myself. The traditional path was I went to a good law school. Everyone I graduated with, basically everyone went to work at a law firm. I did not. I started companies. I didn't even take the bar exam until 5 years later, right? So I think the most important question is to find out what you like and start really experimenting to get an idea of what that is. And I don't mean you. You may be asking this, for your friend or whatever. But, find out what is interesting to you so that you can start taking all of the small steps towards putting yourself in front of other people who are doing it too. And that may be that you create you have an interest in, I don't know, I'm just going to say healthcare apps. You think that healthcare apps are really the future and you have a background in healthcare, whatever. Create a meetup group in Provo for healthcare, period, or healthcare apps, or make it even broader, right? And do events in the engineering department where you're going to get people who actually know how to build this stuff, right? Organize a hackathon. I was just talking to Dean Smith about this. Organize a hackathon. I mean, I've done it before. It's fun. It's super easy. 48 hours, one weekend. Starts on Friday night, ends on Sunday night. Sunday night, you all pitch your ideas to everyone, and maybe there's a prize. Sponsored by Adobe. They have a beautiful new building here. So, do something like that. I mean, Adobe would they'd be crawling all over themselves to do it because they want to have access to your amazing minds and also, people that they may hire, right? So, you're going to be in contact with someone from Adobe who is in charge of sponsorships. They're going to put you in touch with someone else. You're going to keep in touch with all these people. And soon enough, they're going to start inviting you to their events. I mean, this is how it works. It's like this network effect. It's this whole, you can't get from point A to C without going through B. You have to go through B to get to C. So I think just taking all the small steps, whatever they are, and you can do this anywhere you are in the world. You do not need to be in Silicon Valley. Mark Zuckerberg himself said, if he was going to start Facebook all over again, he would have just stayed in Boston. And I think there's no reason for him to move from Boston. There was none. I think maybe at the time there was the money from Silicon Valley and stuff, but he could have had that in Boston too. So, yeah.
Last question.
So you said that your path out of law school wasn't the traditional path, and this lecture is talking about treating your law career like a startup. Do you feel like, so I'm someone who's planning on going to law school, but I'd say I'm more interested in entrepreneurial ventures than actual law. So my question is, what kind of edge does going to law school give you in the entrepreneur world?
Great. Yeah, so I think a lot of edge. I didn't even realize this until I actually did it. I really went to law school because my dad was pushing me to do that, It really is the honest answer. I had other ideas that he thought were crazy. He said, don't worry, go to law school, trust me, it'll be great. And I hated law school. But once I got through it, I realized, wow, this is actually, it's not about learning the law. It's about learning how to think, and learning how to think about one issue in 10 different ways. You're running circles around this one issue. There's a great example in the California bar exam. There's this question, I'll never forget it. Car was driving, so the California bar exam is 3 days. 2 of those days are essays. 1 of those days is multiple choice. It's such a killer, 6 hours a day. So, one of the essay questions, car was driving very fast at night. A black car was driving very fast at night. And on a hilly road in the middle of nowhere with no lights, right? And a black cow crosses the road, and the car hits it, and it creates all this mess. It, veers off into the neighbor's lawn and destroys their tree and their home and all this. I mean, it ended up being this spirals out of control, essay, or question. So how do you think about that? Okay, well, obviously the question is, who's liable for what, right? And or how liable is the driver? And so we get into this analysis of, well, the driver shouldn't have been driving fast. On the other hand, it was night, so he couldn't see the cow, and there's no way he could have seen the cow because the cow was black. And so, there's no street lights. I mean, you have to think about all of these things. On the other hand, why was he driving so fast? So I mean, there's so many different ways you can look at a problem, and that's what law school will teach you. So I encourage you to go through with it. But great news for you is that this class is full of law students, so you should talk to them and see what they think about
that's
that.
right. All right, well, we are out of time, but thank you, Leila, for coming
Welcome.
in. Thanks.